Hello, welcome, good evening. Sorry, I got that totally in the wrong order. Hello, good evening, and welcome. This is the War Room. This is day 63 of Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. We actually have a pretty full show for you tonight, and I need $1,600. But I'm not going to ask you guys for it. I just have to figure out how to get it. Maybe I got to turn tricks or something. I don't know. I've got Yorkie puppies for sale if anyone's interested. You're going to have to come and get them, though. I'm not putting them on greyhounds. The bus, not another dog. Anyway. Yeah, it's been an interesting 24 hours for me. Found out my dad is going in. He's 87. And he's going in for back surgery in about 14 days. So yeah, 2 weeks from now. And I figured it was going to be an outpatient procedure. You know, it's usually like microsurgery, bulge disc kind of a thing. But because of how old he is, they want to be extra careful. So they said he's going to be in there for 3 to 5 days. That's going to really mess up my schedule badly. Anyway, hello to Shady Hill, Randy Adams, and the Finest of Apes for being here early. And let's see, so that was the first bit of weird news. Second bit of weird news was, oh yeah, my RPK that I wanted to buy, that I got impatient for. And then I bought the GF4 rifle. It's in stock now, and they jacked up the price $300. Damn it. I still want it, but I kind of spent the money already. I mean, I've got the money for it now. It's just, it's that kind of money where you're not really supposed to touch it. You know, it's like I'd be better off not doing that right now. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to take it on faith, and I'm going to wait till payday, which is 4 days from now. And if it's still in stock, then maybe buy it. I don't know. This year was weird, man. I went from watching SHOT Show, seeing no guns in SHOT Show that I was interested in this year. And then I decided, fuck it. I'm going to buy the snake guns that I had pre-ordered that my local FFL, who is, I'm sorry, but he was fucking useless. I was on a pre-order for 21 months. That's insane, right? So I gave up on him and I bought it elsewhere. And then 5 or 6 days later, I bought the Anaconda from the same seller. And I just went to my local and I was like, you know that deposit I gave you almost 2 years ago? You see that spam can of 76239? Just give me that. I'm fucking out of here. So I took the spam can. Anyway, I went from not wanting any guns this year, aside from the snake guns, to I now own 2 snake guns and 2 AKs. And I wanted an RPK, and then I wanted an AK-74, and now I want another AK where I want to, of course I have Venmo. Then I want to build another, I'm going to build the Problem Solver, which if you're a fan of Fallout 4, it's an AK where the stock is a shovel handle. And it is Cerakoted in the dumbest color pattern. It's like Cool Runnings Jamaican yellow with like Mopar Grabber green and Passion pink. Like, it's the stupidest color pattern. But to do it like the one in the game, I have to do those stupid colors. Plus I have to get a wood furniture set, just the pistol grip and the lower forend, and then leave them out on my fence for about a month in bad weather, so they sort of punk out and turn kind of grayish and brownish, and then bring it in the house, dry it, seal it, and then put that on the gun. But the problem solver had no upper handguard. It was completely missing. So I'm not putting anything up there, just a lower. I might put a cheese grater on there. I might be able to get away with that. Just so I have something over the barrel. So I don't burn the tips of my fingers when I grab the gun. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a cheese grater on it. Uh, and then it didn't have a top cover. But I'm not running that gun without a top cover. Fuck that. I'll put a top cover on it and then just have it Cerakoted to match the rest of the receiver with those stupid colors. So it'll be very close to the one in the game. So yeah, I went from no AKs to now I'm about to have 7. Go figure. RPK payday Monday. My co-host, on the other hand, his payday's tomorrow, the bastard. He's also the fucker that showed me that the RPK was in stock. That bastard. You know him as Scott P79. On this server, he's known as Scottish Naya, because I gave everyone a Russian or Cyrillic or Ukrainian name. So good evening to you.
Evening.
Terry, yes, you're correct. The days are getting longer. We did hit the daylight savings time a while back, but you can sort of see it in the time that sunset happens, obviously. But I don't know if I was going to share this with you. I had a really weird dream last night, and my friend just became, I think they call it one of the governors of the Constitutional Convention of the States, which is kind of cool. But I had this dream last night, and I guess I will share it with you because it's kind of relevant. It always starts out in the middle. I never have a dream that starts from the beginning to the end. This one started in the middle, and it didn't end, because in my dream, like I was in a lucid dream, like I was in control of it. I realized, I was like, nah, this can't be real. And I woke up. Like as soon as I said that, I woke up. But the funny thing is it started off in a place, I don't know if some of you will understand this reference. There's a place called Dairy Queen, and it's kind of a fast food place. I don't know if they're up north. Are they, Scott?
What?
Dairy Queen. Do you have those up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rare.
Okay, so maybe
Just
some of
few
y'all will
other
notice
things.
this then. So think of a place, if you don't have Dairy Queen, think of some place like Culver's, I guess, if you have those. It's not going to be like a Five Guys or it's not like that. It's a little more rural feeling. Anyway, I walked into this place fully intent on just eating, okay? And in this dream, I decided, I started looking around and I was like, why the hell are there so many people in here? And they were all wearing like political pins. I'm like, what the fuck is going on, right? So I asked somebody, I'm like, hey, uh, why are you all here with those pins on? And somebody was like, oh, Congressman so-and-so. I couldn't remember the name, but it was like, Congressman so-and-so is going to be speaking here today. And all of a sudden, like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, ooh, this is an opportunity. So sure enough, this guy in a suit walks in, and he's got a little political pin, and he introduces himself as a congressman. I think he looked like Paul Betancourt, but I don't expect all you to know who that is. Anyway, he starts talking, and like within like a minute, he just stops, and he looks around and he goes, today isn't about me. Today is about you addressing your concerns to me so I can pass it on and serve you. And I thought, opportunity. So he goes, well, go ahead. Don't be shy if anybody has anything they'd like to say. And I kind of looked around the room and like, I'm the only guy not wearing a pin, right? I wasn't invited to this thing. I just walked in and nobody wanted to talk. So I just stood up and I'm like, can I air out my dirty laundry? And the guy's like, yeah, go right ahead. Introduce yourself. So I did. And I told him I was a psychologist and a sociologist. I did political science growing up. I did criminal pathology growing up. I'm an electrician. I've been a mechanic. He's like, oh, you've done a little bit of everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. And he goes, so what's on your mind? So then I went on this 15-minute tirade about the crisis at the border. And at the beginning, the people in the room looked at me like, how dare you? Or who the hell is this guy? But about 5 minutes in, I had the entire room eating out of the palm of my hand, including this congressman that was sitting there. Like, he was intently listening. I even got away with hashtag MSP. and talking about mining the border. And like everybody just ate it up. And this guy stood up and he goes, son, you're really in the wrong line of work. He was like, you should be doing what I do. And as soon as he said that, I was like, yeah, this is too good to be true. And I woke up 15 minutes before my alarm went off. Anyway,
Hmm.
I don't know what it means. I told my mentor, the guy that's in the Constitutional Convention of the States, I told him about it, and he goes, oh, I know what that means. Now, he usually never says that. He's usually like, I don't know what that means. This time he knew exactly what that meant. He was like, I know exactly what that means. He said, you have a desire to put your energy into something positive and useful. And your dream gave you the opportunity to practice that opportunity. Because he's going to put me in front of my congressman soon. His name is Troy Nels. He used to be my county sheriff. He's the guy who signed my CNR license a couple of years back. So I thought, okay, good practice. Dry run. That's good enough for me. Then I went to work. Anyway, hopefully that's cool. Hopefully something will come of that. I was actually invited to a gathering in Austin, Texas, the capital, last Saturday, at the Constitutional Convention of the States. They had a gathering, and it was kind of a workshop for the guy that was going. And I don't know what to call her. She's one of the officers in charge kind of a thing. She really wanted me to go. Like, I guess he told her a lot about me, and she was like, oh, bring him along. And I just couldn't do it. I had to do the water heater thing this weekend, so I told him, I said, next one comes up, I'll make time. Because I would like to go. My goal is to try to knock my congressman's socks off with ideas, because he's a freshman congressman, and, in the beginning, we elect these guys. Like, let's say Dan Crenshaw, because I'm in Texas, right? So Dan Crenshaw and Troy Nels. These are the two guys that are closest to me that can actually make any difference someday. And, one's a sophomore and one's a freshman congressman. And I would like to get in Dan Crenshaw's face and be like, what have you done for me lately? Because I put you in here. And you have accomplished nothing. I already know the answer, though. The answer is, he's a freshman congressman. Nobody at the Hill knows who the hell he is or what he's about. So obviously nobody's going to nominate him for any committees yet. He has to sort of get chosen. It's like playing kickball and you're like one of the last kids to be picked because nobody knows who the hell you are or what you're capable of. But eventually some committee's going to need somebody, and they're going to be like, all right, come on, fat kid. You're coming with us. And then you get your chance, right? And that fat kid turns into like Babe Ruth or whatever. I shouldn't have used kickball. I should have just said baseball. Anyway, point is, I already know that that's the excuse. So I'm going to try to arm my congressman with a bunch of ideas, and I'll let him take some credit for it. And the only thing I ask for in return is for him to give me the opportunity to quit my day job and take me on as like an intern or something. Because that would be cool. That'd be my only segue into doing what he does. Without having to say, oh yeah, I served in my local government and I was a United States Army major and I don't have to do any of that shit. I'm an ideas guy, so that'll be my segue, hopefully. So anyway, all that bullshit aside, I've already wasted 14 minutes of your time with a long intro and probably half a dozen tangents. Let's go ahead and get started today. Before I get into the timelines, I did want to make mention of this because it is relevant to history. It's relevant to geopolitical situations. It's not relevant to my timeline for Ukraine, but it is relevant because it involves Russia. For those of you who don't know, there was a U.S. Marine by the name of Trevor Reed. He was arrested back in 2019, accused of attacking a Russian police officer or something, and he was held, prisoner for years. And they had been trying desperately to negotiate his release. That happened today. He was released in a prisoner exchange, basically him for a known Russian drug trafficker that that Putin wanted back bad for a long time. So we did a 1-for-1. We traded Trevor Reed for this guy. Um, One thing I had heard, though, was there's another American that has been arrested and in prison in Russia longer than Reed, and not a peep about his possibility of getting released or traded too. Because the thing is a lot of critics right now, they're basically saying, "Way to go! You gave up the one thing that Russia wanted, and you picked the guy that was in there the least amount of time. What about the other guy?" Because now Russia has no desire to trade anymore. And it's like that guy needs to get out too. And then one could even argue Brittany Griner from the WNBA, who was arrested and detained because she was stupid enough to bring drugs into somebody else's country and then got caught with them. One could argue that she needs to be released too. Sorry, I have no empathy for idiots. If you're going to somebody else's country, you should probably learn what not to do before you get there. And don't
Like
think
bring
that,
drugs.
yeah, and don't think that someone's going to bail your ass out diplomatically just because you are who you are. Because I think, if anything, she should know right now that she's just been put in her place. You don't hear any politician making demands for her release. None. Because there's no political advantage to getting her released. There's nothing. And it's like,
She's
wow,
lucky she didn't do that with Singapore.
she'd be
They
dead.
give you the freaking death sentence.
She'd be dead. Anyway, I'm sure she's going to be different when she gets out. I read a story about Trevor Reed just before we went on air, and he is in very poor health. Now, he's not in Otto Warmbier levels of poor health, but that's not confirmed or denied yet either. The video of him being loaded onto a plane, he looked really skinny and he couldn't walk very well. Something was wrong with him. So I think he's going to Walter Reed in the next day or two, and then I guess maybe they'll update us one more time, and then they'll probably just drop the story forever because the family wants their son back and privacy and that sort of thing. But I think the world is going to want to know what his condition is, so we'll probably get that one last story before they stop talking about it. All right, so I mentioned that because I thought it was newsworthy, even though it doesn't really affect the timeline. Although it does affect Russia because they were involved, but it had nothing to do with this war. I don't know. Let's go on and get to the stories. So, first story I got for you today comes 19 minutes after midnight. So, 12:19 a.m. my time, which is dawn, 7:20ish Ukrainian time. I have this photo here for you. I know some of you don't know what that says. Don't worry, I'll translate it for you as best as I can. Okay, so Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with Rafael Mariano Grossi. He is the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, on Tuesday to discuss nuclear safety today on the 36th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. For the Russian military, the Chernobyl zone and the station were allegedly normal territory for hostilities, a territory where they did not even try to take care of nuclear safety. Zelenskyy told this to his reporters after the meeting, according to his office. Grossi said that his main task is to ensure the safety of Ukraine's nuclear plants during the war. That is why the IAEA is in Ukraine and will continue its work. Today we agreed to provide assistance and special work to restore the capacity of the damaged infrastructure. Okay. I guess maybe something is running there. Like, there's more. I thought there was only one reactor in Chernobyl.
No, two.
Is there two? Okay. So they're probably still running the other one.
They were. I think it's shut down now.
Well, I mean, if these guys are back on station, one could argue maybe it's back up, or at least about to be. Especially given.
No, I think they deactivated the other one in the late 90s.
So they got this facility that's fully staffed with a sarcophagus. What are they doing there? Kind of makes you wonder.
Monitoring.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just like, what, Homer Simpson sitting behind a desk looking at a bunch of screens with like one button in front of him?
No, there's a lot more buttons.
I guess. Anyway, moving on. It's been 36 years. Yes, yes, it's been 36 years since Chernobyl. I was shocked too. Yeah. You know those memes about uh, 1986 is 36 years, or we're 36 years ahead in 1986, but if you take it back 36 years, it's 1950. Kind of gives you perspective of, yeah, we're all getting old, isn't it? Fuck. Moving on before I depress everybody. About 2 hours later, so 9:20-ish, and we got a new update from the UK Ministry of Defense. I'll leave this up here for you to read. I'm sure some of this will overlap from my description. Ukraine has retained control. I guess it is the same thing. Ukraine has retained control of a majority of its airspace, the UK Defense Ministry said in Wednesday morning update. Sorry, I'm really tongue-tied for some reason. Russia has failed to effectively destroy the Ukrainian Air Force or suppress Ukrainian air defenses. They continue to hold Russian air assets at risk. The update said Russia's air activity was mainly limited to the southern and eastern Ukraine, adding that the military has limited access to the northern and western part of the country. I don't necessarily believe that, since they still operate out of Belarus, but whatever. The majority of Russian airstrikes in Mariupol are likely being conducted using unguided, free-falling bombs, it added. These weapons reduce Russia's ability to effectively discriminate when conducting strikes, increasing the risk of civilian casualties. Let me enlighten you, comrade. First of all, Russia doesn't have smart anything. They're a bunch of barley porridge eating rotten tooth idiots. They don't use smart weapons. Dumb asses can't use smart anything. That's why they're indiscriminately attacking everything anyway. That was always part of the plan. That's what they do. That is why we have the phrase Russians doing Russian things. It's just what they do. Their whole goal is to break the spirit of the people by slaughtering the people wholesale. They don't care about the military. They know the military's hardened. They're going to fight it out. They want to kill civilians by the bushel. They want the people to force the government to capitulate. They're like, we can't take this anymore. Please just surrender. We're sick of dying. That's what they're trying to do. It's not working. Anyway, moving on. If you like barley porridge, my apologies. It just sounds gross. To me. But if you keep hearing beeping noises, my OBS is flipping out for whatever reason. Sorry, but it doesn't seem like the stream's getting too beat up over it, so whatever, the show goes on. Alright, so about an hour after that, I'm going to take you to the mysterious land of Bulgaria. Ooh. Energy Minister Alexander Nikolov said that the country has enough gas for at least a month, a day after Russia said that it would cut off supplies because the country has refused to pay in rubles. Alternative supplies are available, and Bulgaria hopes that alternative routes and supplies will also be secured at the EU level. He added that Poland and Lithuania are in the exact same situation. He said that it was obvious that Russia was using gas as a political tool. As long as I am minister, Bulgaria will not negotiate under pressure. Bulgaria is not for sale and does not succumb to any trade counterpart. Doesn't that sound sort of like, we do not
We
negotiate
will
with
not.
terrorists?
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of figured that much. Anyway, yeah, Russia turned the spigot off, and now there's no gas flowing into Bulgaria, Lithuania, or Poland. What was I going to say about that? I forgot.
Article 5.
No. Trying to remember why that was so important to me today.
NATO members.
No, the rubles thing. When this
Oh,
all
yeah.
started, and we started laying out sanctions, and we started laying out bans, and the rest of the world started doing the same thing, when we started cutting off MasterCard and Visa and American Express, when we shut down McDonald's and all that stuff, the ruble became worthless. Like, really worthless. So, Putin, to his credit, was a genius. He changed the rules of his export, saying, if you're going to buy my stuff, you have to pay me in rubles. And because he did that, the ruble's value rebounded beyond its 52-week high. So, in terms of creating economic stability for his country, the guy's a genius. But the only problem is not all the nations that were buying from them are willing to pay in rubles. So what does he do? He turns the spigot off. So he's sort of cutting off his own nose to spite his face, but in a way you have to look at it from his perspective. His country's money was becoming worthless. He had to stabilize it. So credit where it's due, he does good crisis management for that. Still an asshole, but he's smart.
The only problem is he stabilized it. He didn't fix it.
No. He stabilized it, and then the value of the ruble exceeded its 52-week high, which means it's actually overvalued, better than it was before this all started.
For how long?
And that's to be determined. But still, I mean,
exactly.
It's been that way for what, 2 weeks now? Maybe 3 weeks? So, I mean, it's working. Basically, what Russia's doing is
in
they're
the short
laughing.
term, yeah, but in the long term, it ain't
Well, they're
gonna work.
laughing at the fact that these sanctions didn't do shit to them at the end. In a way. But like you said,
it cut
long
them off
term.
from international markets.
But how long term are we talking here? I mean, years? Does the world have years to ride this out? Does the average Russian person, can they ride this out?
Well, think of it this way. How much crap besides oil and gas, Russia export?
Grain,
Practically
wheat.
nothing.
No, they're part of the breadbasket of the world.
Ukraine is a bigger exporter of wheat.
No. Combined, they put out over 40% of the world's wheat. I think it's like 26.
Combined.
Yeah, but like 26 or 28% of it is Russia. The remainder, like 14%, that's Ukraine. It's still a lot. Don't get me wrong, because in the global scale,
was
40%.
Before World War II, Ukraine was referred to as the breadbasket of Europe.
Well, yes and no.
For a reason.
Half of Ukraine and the extreme western part of Russia, that whole region right there. But yeah, that phrase is something that is passed around. But it's both parts of that. So it's like Donetsk, Luhansk, and then like the parts of Russia that are just on the other side of the border. That's all part of that breadbasket of the world thing. But yeah, 40% of the grain. That's impressive. Anyway, point is, what else does Russia export? Oil, gas,
not
wheat,
much else.
Wheat, corn, sorghum. We're the biggest exporter of sorghum, but we're the
biggest exporter of corn.
Are we?
Yeah.
Well, they're pretty big too. I mean, it comes up. I mean, they got a lot of space, right? Like, there's some farm space. Anyway. I think what's going to really hurt them, and this really depends on how tough Germany's going to be about this, right? The joke is Russian mobsters and posers and wannabes, Adidas tracksuits, driving S-Class, E-Class, Mercedes, G-Wagons, BMW M3s and M5s. All German cars, right? What happens when those cars break down? And Germany says, fuck you, we're not sending you parts. And now...
Same thing with their airliners.
I'd like to know, has Germany shut down all the dealership networks? BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, Volkswagen.
I would assume.
One would hope.
Assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. But here's the thing. Most of the Russian civilian transport aircraft are leased aircraft from other countries.
Transport aircraft?
Yeah, civilian airliners.
Airbus.
Those are not just Airbus, Boeings.
You're saying Aeroflot runs... I thought they ran Airbuses.
They run everything.
Does Tupolev not make commercial aircraft anymore?
They make very little. Most of the Russian civilian transport aircraft, I think it was like 700 planes.
Wait a minute.
Which is a
Good.
lot of freaking planes.
Terry was saying something, and I think Randy took it as a joke, but he's actually right. Russia does export a shitload of fertilizer. Because if you've been watching our markets, they've been talking about grain prices, vegetable prices, cattle feed, things like that. All of that has to be grown. All of that requires fertilizer, and now there's a shortage of fertilizer. So I think he was like, it was taken as a joke, but he's actually serious. He's right. That is correct. They are a big exporter of fertilizer. The joke part is...
Yeah, and we don't have the capability of doing that ourselves.
Well, it depends. I mean, if we keep letting all the illegals across the border, they can shit all over the place in San Francisco, and we can just scrape it off the streets and use it as fertilizer. I went there. Because the joke is Russians are so full of shit, it's just pouring out their ears. Of course they're the biggest net exporter of fertilizer. Anyway, that was the joke. But, I mean, he's actually right. Chemical fertilizers and things like that, they are a giant exporter of it. That is correct. So let's move on, because I really wanted to get you guys out of here in an hour, and that's clearly not going to happen anymore. Let's see. About another hour goes by. I'm going to take you back to Ukraine. It is just before lunchtime. It's about 11:20-ish, 11:30-ish. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Wednesday morning said that Russia announcing it would cut off gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland over not paying in rubles was unjustified and unacceptable. She called Russian gas giant Gazprom's announcement blackmail. That's a buzzword that has been being tossed around all day today in all the news outlets, not just ours, CBC, Al Jazeera. Everyone's using the buzzword blackmail today. And it shows once again the unreliability of Russia as a gas supplier. She said that the EU is prepared and will also continue working with international partners to secure alternative flows of gas. She also added that Europeans can trust that we stand united and in full solidarity with the member states impacted in the face of this new challenge. Europeans can count on our full support. Right. Okay, so I read some statistics today because it wouldn't be useful information if I didn't tell you the details. Poland suspects that it can withstand this shortage for, I think they said 4 to 6 months, because they only consume slightly less than 50% of all intake of natural gas from all of its sources, which means they store a lot of it. Strategic reserves, basically, right? Just a little under 50%. They can weather this storm for a couple of months while they're looking for alternative sources, like us, for instance. Setting up the infrastructure and the logistics and the shipping routes for that. Okay, you got 4 to 6 months to sort this shit out, basically. However, it's Bulgaria that's actually kind of in a pinch here because they use 90% of everything they take in. So they suspect that they've only got about 25 to 30 days worth of reserve. They're the ones who are in the biggest pinch. So when Ursula von der Leyen says that she's going to help them, that's the country that's going to need the most attention. I guarantee you that's the country that's going to get the least attention. Because she's going to help Poland first. Because that looks better. PR-wise. Let's be honest. I mean, they're still politicians. Moving on.
Well, here's the thing. They could probably get LNG tankers going to Europe within a couple weeks.
Right, but they have to secure from who and at what price, and then customs clearances and shipping clearances, stuff like that.
I'm sure Bulgaria will be able to expedite shipping clearances.
Possibly. Do they have a seafront?
I don't know if Bulgaria does, but I believe most of the European countries are all freaking interconnected.
They are. I'd imagine if they have an electrical grid.
So it's a matter of just finding a close port.
Here's the problem.
And
The only waterway that Bulgaria has is the Black Sea. Nothing is allowed in or out right now.
Military vessel wise.
Any vessel wise. Turkey clamped it down. They were like, nobody's coming in or out. Just bang. They enabled some doctrine from like 1936 or something. That's how they were given that authority. They get to close it at Istanbul, and then there's another one at like Kanakkale or something like that. So there's two entry points, because there's
Constantinople.
No. Well, that's what Istanbul used to be. Yeah, but there's two entry points. There's east and west on the Sea of Marmara, which means you have to go through the Aegean, through that. I think it's called Kanakkale or something like that. That's the westernmost entry point to the Sea of Marmara, and then it's like probably a day or two's worth of commute until you get to Istanbul, and then that's the entry point on the east side that gets you into the southwest corner of the Black Sea. They closed both of those because they were given that authority. So I was like, okay. Problem is there's still some Russian warships out there. They're 200 miles off the coast of Odessa now because they realized, oh shit, Neptune missiles can actually sink ships. So they figured out that Neptune missiles can actually hit ships because the anti-missile systems can't detect them when they're at water top level in choppy seas.
Oh, that's not a problem at all.
Huh.
That's not a problem at all to get into fucking Bulgaria.
Well, yeah, they got...
Ship it right through Greece.
Yeah, because they're next door neighbors, aren't they?
It looks like there's less than about a 50-mile gap between southern Bulgaria and, like, the Med.
Well, they'll sort it out eventually.
Before you get to Istanbul.
Yeah, they'll sort it out eventually. All right, moving on. Otherwise, we're never, ever getting through this. Now, you've heard me bring these up before, so it shouldn't surprise you that I'm bringing them up again. So I'll start with the picture. There you go. And this came out at about an hour after the last story, so about 12:30. And this is local time, Ukrainian time. About 12:30. Russian troops hit I think it's called Avdiivka in the Donetsk region with Willie Petes, or white phosphorus shells, causing fires. Regional Governor Pavlo Kirilenko claimed on Wednesday morning. He said that the Russians attacked the center of the city and the Avdiivka coke and chemical plant, not soda. One person was injured in the attacks, which is actually quite fortunate, because if anybody knows anything about white phosphorus, that's a fire you can't put out if it touches you. You will be miserable, or you will die a very miserable death. It cooks you. It just doesn't stop burning. That's horrible. Matter of fact, they even covered that I think they covered it in an episode of MASH one time, which was fascinating because they did that thing where they turned off all the lights in the operating room, and you could see these bright white glowing little orbs of like pieces of shrapnel that still had white phosphorus like residue on them, and that's what they had to keep pulling out of people. Anyway, these are much bigger. These are much worse. And I think they go against it's not Geneva. It goes against some convention. Like, you're not supposed to use those or vacuum bombs or whatever. So it's like that canister in that top right picture, that can only be the one thing that they're accusing it of being. So, like, that's what they look like. That's what it does. Those fires are the result of that. So the Russians aren't going to be like, because they can't deny the photos. Like, how could you? That looks photoshopped. I don't think Russians have the phrase "that looks photoshopped." They just shoot you. All right, moving on. At the same time, 6 hours east of Ukraine, so it is 6:30 p.m. in Beijing. And it took me a while to find a photo of this because the story didn't include it, so I had to go elsewhere. And here it is. DJI Technology Corporation, a Chinese company that makes drones, said that it is temporarily suspending business in Russia and Ukraine to avoid having its product used in the war. The company has also denied claims that it leaked data about Ukraine's military to Russia. DJI Technology is the first Chinese company to cite the war as a reason for halting sales. I have a theory about this. I think they don't want to send drones over anymore because they're about to have a newer model and they don't make the one in that photo anymore. And that might be the one that was in theater. And what they're probably doing is they're not going to send the new ones because if they get shot down, people are going to look at them, study them, know how they work, know how to track them, and know how to destroy them before China kicks off its incursion into Taiwan. Just a thought, just a theory, but it's like one could argue that that's exactly why they would stop it, because the Chinese military will use the new version and they don't want you to know what it is, who made it, how it works. Not until it's too late. Just a theory. I'm not telling you to go invest in Reynolds Wrap right now, but the math checks out. Why else would you deny it? They can say they're taking the PR high road, but there's an ulterior motive. They're Chinese. It's what they do. It's just what they do, man.
I've got a better one for you. Apparently, the Ukrainians recovered one of the Su-35s.
Fullback?
Mm-hmm. That's mostly intact.
That's a good-looking plane.
It's their latest generation one.
Yeah, I love it.
Which the Chinese and got large portions of the technology that's still highly classified and have already transferred it to the United States.
Nice.
Yeah. And here's the kicker. China bought like 20 or 30 of those and then reverse engineered their shit from them.
Yeah.
So they based all their tracking systems.
Oh, so you're saying that
which the United States
figure
now
theirs
has
out because they have it. Okay.
Because they basically copied the Russians.
God, could you imagine being the guy here in the United States who gets to receive that shipment? Like he just looks at it and be like, "Let's get this out onto a tray." Nice.
Well, here's the thing. How much more effective is that going to make our electronic jamming equipment?
I don't know. I mean, do you really need the jamming equipment if you can just hit it with a tomahawk? You can't jam their system any better than using a tomahawk.
Plane with a tomahawk.
Huh?
You can't hit a plane with a tomahawk.
Stanger, whatever.
But here's the thing. If they can't track you, they can't see you coming.
Yeah, but they can't see us coming anyway. We have the B-2 Spirit.
Not as effective as it used to be. That's why they got the B-21.
Well, it's just an upgraded B-2. Bigger, too, I think, right? Anyway.
It's what the B-2 should have been when they did the B-2 in the first place.
Yeah, but I mean, think about what year that came out and what year it is today, and it's like, okay, it's come a long way.
They've been flying for 20-plus years.
Yeah. I mean, think about what the B-2 is and the XB-47 that actually came before it, and they just couldn't figure out how to make it work without computers that... I mean, think about it like this, right? You remember that scene in Iron Man 3, I think it is, where Tony Stark is watching a video of his dad, and it's like there's an outtake, and he stops, and he goes, Tony.
Yes.
I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one of these days I hope you can solve this. That's basically what the XB-47 was. We had it with tradition. We had the XB-35. I think it was a 35. And that was the...
They had the little orange one.
No. XB-35 was an XB-47, but with propeller-driven engines. And then the 47 was the one with the jet engines, flying wings. Okay. And then they said we really need, faster computer controls kinds of things to make this work. We can't do this with traditional cables and hydraulics. So then the B-2 came out, 40 years later? Because they finally had the technology, and now the B-21 is out 40 years later, than that, and you're just like, hey, we got it to work. Anyway, moving on. This next story, I call it the story of the day, mainly because it's just really long, but it's also very relevant, and the photo's kind of big, and he looks kind of stoned. I wish this came out 7 days ago so I can give him the excuse, it's 420, man. Anyway, story of the day, 12:28, so about 12:30 Ukrainian time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy marked the 36th anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster with a speech condemning Russia's completely irresponsible actions around nuclear power plants during its invasion and calling for global control of the Kremlin's nuclear capabilities. Now think about that. He's basically saying that if he defeats Russia, NATO should have full control of Russian nuclear capabilities. Basically that thing we've been talking about for the last 6 weeks. We're at a point in history where Russia can be completely wiped off the face of the earth as a global superpower. That's basically what he's saying. Every year on April 26th, the world remembers the Chernobyl disaster, the worst nuclear disaster in human history. But this year, it is not enough to just remember Chernobyl, because this year, Russia had created new threats that could even surpass that worst accident. The president recalled the night of March 4th, when a fire broke out at Zaporizhia's nuclear power plant after foreign or Russian forces started shelling the plant amid the invasion. They knew exactly what object they were firing at, he says, but they had an order to seize that object at any cost. They didn't care about anything. They didn't care that the Zaporizhia station was the largest in Europe. It has like, I think 6 to 8 reactors. 6 for sure, maybe 8. They didn't think about how many power units there are and how the shelling could end. Zelenskyy recalled speaking with world leaders that night, including U.S. President Joe Biden. It is even surprising how quickly and completely Russia, the whole country, can forget about the worst catastrophe that its people have ever experienced as well, the president added, noting that Russians suffered in the wake of the Chernobyl disaster on April 26, 1986. Rather than commemorating the anniversary of the disaster, which killed less than 100 people directly, but increased mortality over the following decades in the surrounding area, Russia had escalated the situation, Zelenskyy charges. Instead, today they launched 3 missiles against Ukraine, so that they flew directly over the blocks of our nuclear power plants, over 3 nuclear power plants at once, over at Zaporizhia, Khmelnytsky, and South Ukrainian nuclear power plants. The president says, "What is it? Why are they threatening these? There are no words for this. It turns out that they do not realize what Chernobyl is at all," he says. Russian troops were trying to attack Kyiv through the Chernobyl zone, used the restricted area as a military base. They set up positions on land where it is forbidden to even stand there. He also noted that Russian forces looted the Chernobyl radiation monitoring system. They looted a nuclear analytical laboratory. Only thanks to the professionalism and conscientiousness of our specialists working at the station, we managed to save Ukraine and to save Europe from another catastrophe. He also noted that the IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi met with him in Kyiv to commemorate the disaster and pledge his support. We discussed all the dangers created by Russia and ways to possibly influence the situation to protect Europe and the world from completely irresponsible actions of the Russian Federation. He then called for a global takeover of all of Russia's nuclear capabilities. I believe that after all that the Russian military has done in the Chernobyl zone and at the Zaporizhia power plant, no one in the world can feel safe knowing how many nuclear facilities, nuclear weapons, and related technologies in the Russian state, or that the Russian state has. If Russia has forgotten what Chernobyl is, it means that global control over Russia's nuclear facilities and nuclear technology is needed. Grossi also visited Chernobyl and delivered IAEA resources to the plant, which Russian forces held for 5 weeks until they withdrew on March 31st. He thanked staff for their resilience and courage amid the conflict. We do not only have respect for you, but we have the admiration for you because you did exactly what you were expected to do, Grossi told the workers. You showed professionalism, courage, and of course, patriotism. But you did the right thing, so don't worry, we're here. The IAEA is here to stay. That sounds kind of scary, actually. Also on Tuesday, Russia escalated the threat of nuclear warfare amid its war in Ukraine by alleging that Kyiv is developing nuclear weapons with U.S. support. The need for demilitarization is due to the fact that Ukraine, saturated with weapons, poses a threat to Russia, including from the point of view of the development and use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. This came from the Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev. He said this on state-owned news agencies. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who met with Zelenskyy in Kyiv over the weekend, called the comments very dangerous. I think this any bluster about the use of nuclear weapons is very dangerous and unhelpful, he told reporters on Tuesday. Nobody wants to see a nuclear war because nobody can win it. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, which the Soviet Union had left in the country back in December of 1994, in exchange for security assurances from Russia, Britain, and the United States. Well, yeah, they had them. Don't you think they reverse engineered them? They don't have to develop something they already had possession of, and then willingly gave back in 2 stages, once in 94 and again in 2014. All their remaining nuclear arsenal was taken away in in 2014 as a precursor to joining NATO. That was 8 years ago. They're still not a member nation. We disarmed them for nothing. Anyway, that was what I called the story of the day because it included that major announcement about what we should do about Russian nuclear energy and weapons. There is a response. I think I do have it in a story later in the show. Let's see. Let me catch up on some of the chat. HVS says that the current NATO strategy to fight to the last dead Ukrainian sounds safer for the rest of us. The current NATO strategy to fight to the last dead Ukrainians sounds safer for the rest of us. You mean we sit back and watch it happen, and then if they're eradicated, we were never involved, but if they win, then they resent us for not helping them. Not on the scale they asked for. I don't know. Anyway. Warsaw Patriot, the Polish Hammer. Oh, let me add him in. He's been asking me to bring him in here. So there he is. You see, you said he looks like crap. Yeah, he does look sleep deprived, the poor guy. I mean, he's been up countless hours for 63 days.
Yeah.
Probably even longer. Probably before the war began, because he had been watching the buildup outside the border of his country since April of last year. He's been making the inquiries and the requests for help and assistance and weapons and all sorts of things since April of last year. And a lot of this stuff didn't get there until it was too late. And a lot of analysts, including General Jack Keane, who is the founder of the Academy of the Study of War or something like that here in this country, even he was saying how much of this could have been prevented if we actually gave them the weapons they asked for back last April or May or even June before this whole thing kicked off, because then they would have had the deterrence in place to prevent Russia from even thinking about coming in. And he would be right. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, let me move on. Ooh, I get to show you some fire. And this was not an easy picture to find either, actually, but I found a good one. That one. Really good.
So is Ukraine's kicking Russia's ass right now still?
Something like that. 2:31 p.m. Ukrainian time. This is a post facto. This came out the day after. Actually, no. Yeah. Sorry. This is a post facto. Came out the day after when this story was posted. This actually started last night. But the best picture I could find was from the nighttime when the explosion and the big fire happened. The day shots, 12 hours later, wasn't as impressive looking as that picture right there. A Ukrainian presidential advisor said Wednesday that karma is a cruel thing. I think the translation is actually karma's a bitch. But they couldn't say that because, journalism. After a Russian ammo depot burst into flames, and explosions were heard along provinces bordering the war-torn country. Mikhailo Podolyak made the remark after a Russian official said that a fire was extinguished at the ammo depot in the Belgorod region. The border provinces of Kursk and Voronezh, Voronezh. Sorry, that one was hard to read. So the border provinces of Kursk and Voronezh also reported fresh explosions Wednesday, with officials there claiming to have intercepted Ukrainian drones, according to Reuters. I got you a Reuters story. If you decide to massively attack another country, massively kill anyone there, massively crush people with tanks, and to use warehouses in your regions to enable the killings, then sooner or later the debts will have to be repaid. Podolyak was quoted as saying. He reportedly added that it was impossible to sit out the Russian assault of Ukraine, and therefore the disarmament of the Belgorod and Voronezh killers' warehouses is an absolutely natural process. Karma is a cruel thing. The extent of the damage caused by the fire in Belgorod is unclear, and it is unknown whether a similar facility was targeted in Voronezh, as Podolyak appeared to suggest. But Russia said it was sending investigators to Kursk and Voronezh regions to probe the illegal actions by the Ukrainian army. Illegal actions by the Ukrainian army. I like the other thing better. Karma's a bitch.
So, hey, Sean.
Yes?
Remember that wipe your feet mat you could use that Putin you disrespect on?
Yes.
There's a sale right now. It's available, and it's only it'll end in 2 hours right now. If you want.
I found a company that sells doggy training pads, where they pee and poo on, with his face superimposed on them.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the mats are now on sale under $14.95 right now, and 50% off right now.
Well, I'm watching my dog shit on his face, so I mean that's priceless. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. That was the Belgorod Ammo Depot. Yes. And oh yeah, the next one's okay. So the next one is where did I put that? Right here. That may look familiar to some of you, maybe not. Don't worry, I'll explain what that is shortly. 4:35 p.m. Ukrainian time, so we're already winding down the day a bit. Moscow once again threatened to attack Kyiv if Ukraine targeted troop supply lines in Russia, saying it will retaliate with long-range smart weapons. I'm sorry, but they haven't done anything smart so far, so why would I take them for their word now? The threat came Tuesday evening after UK Defense Minister James Heappey said hitting Russian logistics was a legitimate part of war as Russian forces continue a second assault in the eastern and southern Ukraine. It is entirely legitimate to go after targets in the depth of your opponents to disrupt their logistics and supply lines, he said in a BBC radio interview. But the Kremlin, which has accused NATO of fighting a proxy war against Russia, said it would strike Ukraine's capital if its forces were touched on its own soil. We would like to stress that London's direct instigation of the regime in Kyiv to commit such actions. Should these attempts to materialize, we will instantly entail our proportionate response, the Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement, according to Russian-owned media. As we have warned, the Russian armed forces are ready round the clock to carry out retaliatory strikes with long-range smart weapons against decision-making centers in Kyiv. The Defense Ministry further warned that it would have no qualms hitting Western officials who happen to be in Kyiv, providing it with the assistance. Remember that thing we talked about the other day? Yeah. Anyway, the subjects of one of these Western countries present at the Ukrainian decision-making centers in Kyiv in the capacity of advisors will not necessarily constitute a problem for Russia in making a decision to retaliate, the ministry added. The comments came 2 days after Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin met with President Zelenskyy in Kyiv. The trip was the highest-level American visit to Ukraine since the war began more than 60 days ago. Multiple blasts were reported at the Russian ammunition depot in Belgorod, and Russia claimed to have intercepted drones in 2 other border regions. Russia had previously accused Ukraine of hitting cross-border targets, but Kyiv has not taken responsibility for any such attacks. Though Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak called the Wednesday blasts karma, and then this is a part where it just repeats itself over about the if you attack a massively another country, the debts will be repaid. Are you okay? Okay. Sorry, it just sounded like you were falling into a well or something. NATO allies this week renewed pledges to continue arming and aiding Ukraine as it prepares for what defense officials have warned will be a brutal second offensive by Russian forces. Now, if you don't know what that vehicle is, it's a truck. Sorry. That's called a Grad missile launcher, and that's what the missile looks like as it's being launched. And they use those, and they're supposedly a precision-guided weapon. They're smart weapons. I don't believe it. Moving on. I know HVS keeps asking me to post pictures of Putin's mistress, but she's nothing to look at. I'm telling you. Hang on. I'm just gonna try to see if I can find what you're asking for. I doubt it, but... Damn, never mind. Hey. Well. Nah, you're gonna have to look that up yourself. Sorry, dude. I'll make you a thumbs down for just that, right? Sorry.
Don't give him crazy ideas.
I'm not gonna do it. I get thumbs down anyway. Doesn't matter. Alright, so moving on. Let's see. So this is about around the same time. About 20 to the hour. So about 4:40-ish. And do I have a photo? I do have a photo for you for this. Here you go. You've probably seen me post pictures of this place before in the last 4 or 5 days. 4:37 p.m. That's the time I got this story. Mariupol officials said Wednesday that the Russian military is attempting to storm again and again a steel factory in the city where officials have said up to 1,000 civilians are taking cover. The continuing blitz on the Azovstal plant comes a day after the Mariupol City Council shared what it described as scary images of medical work being done to treat the injured still trapped inside the sprawling industrial complex. Air attacks on Azovstal has not subsided. No silence, but attempts to storm again and again. This came from Petro Andriushenko. Andriushenko. Yeah, an advisor to Mariupol's mayor that wrote this on his Telegram page on Wednesday. Andriushenko said that the repeated attacks show Vladimir Putin's army is not hiding further plans for Azovstal or its defenders. At the same time, street fights continue again in the sector from the Azovstal plant management to the street. On Tuesday, Mariupol City Council released graphic images reportedly showing wounds being treated by medical workers inside the Azovstal factory. This is what the hospital in one of the Azovstal shelters looks like. Scary photos, but the world needs to know what's going on. The council said women, children, and the elderly are among those taking refuge in the factory in unsanitary and terrible conditions without medication. Also on Tuesday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, after meeting with Russian Foreign Ministry Sergei Lapdog, I still call him that, in Moscow, proposed the formation of a humanitarian contact group that would facilitate safe evacuations of Ukrainians trapped in cities like Mariupol. This is the same Russian leadership that said that they will not attack that plant and will just surround it as a blockade until they surrender. I think that lasted a whole 2 hours and they started attacking it again anyway. Russians doing Russian things. They just, like, right out of their... They're more liberals than our liberals, aren't they? I mean, think about it like this. Page 1 of the DNC playbook. Preemptively accuse the other side of which you're guilty of first. That way you set the narrative, right? What have we heard Russia do constantly? They're developing biological weapons. The Ukrainians are developing nuclear weapons to the United States. You're the ones using Willie Petes. You're the ones who are using vacuum bombs. And then they turn around and say, no, we're not going to attack that plant. And 2 hours later, they're attacking that plant. They're more liberals than our liberals. Easily. So I guess the next person to join the squad will be a Russian national. Anyway. Let's see. Moving on. About an hour later, so now we're getting into the sunset hours. 5:40 Ukrainian time. And I do have a photo for you here. It's not necessarily part of the story. It was tied to it, but I just thought it was pretty cool looking. It's like, anybody want to name that rifle he's holding? I'm sure you all know, especially those of you more versed in AKs than I am. I know it's an underfolder. I know that much.
Let me look at this thing.
I know it's 7.6239 by the curve of the magazine. Pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I think I know that much.
Let's see.
Anyway, I'm going to read the story while you figure that out.
That, my friend, looks like a Russian AKMS.
Underfolder. Yeah,
it's an underfolder.
Yeah. Well, the guy carrying it is Ukrainian, and he had just finished blowing up an APC, and he found that beret inside it, so he decided to stick it on the end of his gun for that photo.
and that's not just any beret, that's a green beret.
Dude's a badass.
He just took out a green beret.
The Russians,
well, the dude was a badass. Now he's a casualty.
Was wearing it.
Yeah, now he's just a stain in a memory. So anyway, 5:40 p.m. Ukrainian time. Ukraine's defense ministry on Wednesday claimed that fighting-age men in southern and eastern regions of Ukraine are being abducted en masse, in part for Russian propaganda victory parades. Both Western and Ukrainian officials have warned that Russia could be targeting a significant advancement in Ukraine before May 9th, also known as Victory Day, which celebrates when Russia defeated Nazi Germany in 1945. Sidebar: no other nation in the world holds a victory over Nazi Germany like Russia does on May 9th. It's the biggest display. It's sort of like the October Revolution thing. Like, they celebrate this. This is like a national holiday to them. Anyway, Ukraine first announced last week that it believed Russia was looking to forcibly conscript Ukrainian men in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions to replenish its forces. You notice I'm getting better at pronouncing that fucking city? But on Wednesday, its defense ministry said that it suspects that there's another reason why it's targeting able fighting men. The main purpose of such actions is to replenish the exchange fund, the defense ministry said. Ukrainian hostages are planned to be exchanged for Russian war criminals. It is also possible to organize propaganda victory parades with the participation of detained Ukrainians, the statement continued. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that it had received information that the abducted men may be paraded through the streets of occupied cities as prisoners of war. I'm thinking of the final quote or final monologue at the end of the Patton movie about how the Russian conquerors would walk down the streets in triumph with the day's prisoners in tow. Remember that speech that he had? And then he was like, one of the slaves would whisper, "All victory is fleeting," or something like that. This is kind of like, this is the flavor I'm getting reading this. The victims of the occupiers are often men of military age, the ministry said in a statement, noting that former military law enforcement officers and pro-Ukrainian activists are being targeted and taken to filtration camps. Is that what they're calling them these days? The ministry said that an estimated 400 Russian soldiers bearing the Rosguard uniform donned by Russia's National Guard recently arrived at a village in the Kherson region to search for and detain men of military age. The detained Ukrainian men are being taken out en masse in the direction of the occupied Crimea, the ministry said. Another 300 Ukrainian activists and military veterans are said to be being held at a pre-trial detention center in Kherson, where they are being interrogated and tortured. though the statement did not go into any details on what they are actually being interrogated about. Ukraine has said that the arbitrary detainment and forced deportation of its citizens amounts to war crimes. Yeah. Duh.
Well, that camp that you were talking about sounds
Filtration camps?
suspiciously like something the Nazis would have called a concentration camp.
They didn't call them concentration camps. They called them work camps.
Well, some of them were
We
work
called
camps.
them
Some of
concentration
them were
camps.
constant. No. Some of them were work camps. Some of them were just death camps.
Well, extermination centers, but yeah. But they all started off as work camps. They were like, oh, yeah, you work here, we'll let you go. That never happened.
No,
Right.
we'll work you to death here.
Yeah, but see, I'm just so full of useless movie quotes because now it's like all of a sudden I'm thinking of, what was it, Captain America, the First Avenger, and it was like, don't worry, Doctor, we could always get more workers. We'll just have to work them
Let's
harder.
go.
But they're already working to death. That's okay, Doctor. We can always get more workers. Red Skull. Shit. All right, so moving on. About an hour later, and do I have a photo for this? I don't have a photo for this one, but it's a good story anyway. And it comes out of the Azovstal Steelworks. So, 6:40-ish p.m. Ukrainian time. The commander of Ukrainian forces is still holding off Russian troops in Mariupol, made an urgent plea Wednesday to world leaders, including Pope Francis, and said there are still 600 soldiers and civilians stuck in the deadly standoff. Sergei Volnya, the commander of the 36th Separate Marine Brigade, I showed you his picture a couple days ago, said his troops, along with civilians caught in the crossfire at the Azovstal steel plant, were surrounded by Russian forces. Over 1,000 people were estimated to have taken shelter in the tunnels under the steel plant and have been unable to evacuate under Russia's constant barrage of missile strikes. Volnya said that not only did the elderly and injured need attention, but also noted that they were running short on food, water, and defenses. In a Facebook post, strangely enough, the commander pointed to other examples of extraordinary evacuations, including the infamous World War II miracle of Dunkirk, when more than 338,000 British and French troops were evacuated after being cornered by German forces on a beach in France. Winston Churchill, in a famous speech in 1940, called the events in Dunkirk a wonderful salvation, Volnya wrote Wednesday. Churchill's praises were intended for a rescue operation in which 338,226 French and British soldiers were evacuated from the beach and harbor of the city of Dunkirk in France. 2022, Mariupol, he concluded. This guy's a student of history. He knew the exact number. Kind of impressive. The other thing that I'd like to note is the Azovstal Steelworks is a complex, like it's an industrial block, right? And it's got a network of tunnels. Apparently, that network of tunnels leads to nowhere else, meaning they can't get out. Like, for instance, if I told you that Canada was laying siege to New York City, first of all, people would be cheering, right? Second of all, people would be laughing because they'd be like, Canada ain't got no guns. But let's just hypothetically have this little social exercise, okay? Let's just say Canada gets rid of Trudeau. And they're like, Second Amendment, we want that. And they have it. Better than we've got it. And they decide, New York, fuck you, we're taking over. And let's say they lay siege to the New York City, right? And you've got this brigade of militia in New York that are trapped in Grand Central Station. They can take the subway tunnels and get the hell out of Dodge, because those tunnels are connected for miles. Apparently, the Azovstal Steelworks tunnels lead to nowhere. Otherwise, don't you think they would have snuck out under the cover of darkness in the middle of the night through the tunnels? I would think so. It's common sense, right? You're being laid siege to. I mean, imagine if they did that and Russia gets frustrated because they're not getting a response from anyone inside the building. So they just hit it with like 50 bunker busters from Tu-95 Bears because they've already hit it once or twice already. And then they check the rubble and there's nobody in there. They don't have the way out, obviously. Those tunnels don't go to anywhere. Maybe they just inter-network between the buildings in the block.
They might do that, but they also may have already collapsed all the exits.
They being who? Because like if the Russians don't know
the
how
Russians,
well, but they don't know the network. They don't know the network like the people who built
that city, though.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, they have. Like, there's nothing left. You're right. There's almost nothing left of Mariupol.
They leveled the city, so.
But they leveled the city on the surface.
The rubble fucking. Yeah, but the rubble could be literally blocking the exits.
All of them? Well, yeah, we don't know how intricate it is.
They've done to the city.
Fair enough. We don't know how intricate the network is, so yeah, okay. But I would argue that because it's an industrial block of steel plants, foundries, and ironworks, most of those tunnels are probably service tunnels just between the buildings for simple logistics. So they're probably just like, it's like a closed off intranet network. You know what I mean? Like they're not subways or anything. They're just access tunnels between buildings within the block, which it gives you some flexibility, but you're still trapped. You can't get out of that network. Anyway, moving on. Around the same time, I'm going to take you over to Moscow. Now I'm going to show you a picture that's probably going to make you lose your lunch. So, here it is. Anyway, 6:43 p.m., Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday claimed Moscow's war goals in Ukraine will be unconditionally fulfilled, despite discussions this week amongst Ukraine's allies to further support Kyiv's government with weapons in the fight. Speaking to Russia's parliament, Putin said, "I want to emphasize again that all the tasks of the special military operation we are conducting in the Donbass and Ukraine, launched on February 24th, will be unconditionally fulfilled. That," he said, "will guarantee the security of the residents of separatist regions in eastern Ukraine that Russia recognized as independent shortly before launching its military action in Ukraine, as well as Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, and our entire country in the historical perspective." The remarks come a day after dozens of defense ministers huddled at the U.S. Air Force's Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany for a meeting that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin later told Fox News, I got a Fox story for you, was all about making sure that we can continue to provide Ukraine with what it needs to be successful in the fight today. Great, but what about tomorrow? They'll need different kinds of things to be able to shape that fight a bit better, Austin told Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who I swear looks like she's always in a constant state of chemotherapy, but I digress. Noting that the terrain in Ukraine's south and east, so we're looking at long-range artillery and tanks and armored vehicles and those type of things. That's great, because apparently we're getting Flak Panzer Gepards from Germany, finally. Why don't you just send a couple of Leopard 2A7s while you're at it? Wouldn't hurt. Anyway. On Tuesday, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Putin also met one-on-one for the first time since Russia invaded, and the United Nations said that they agreed on arranging evacuations from the besieged steel plant in the battered city of Mariupol. Again, bullshit, because they're still attacking it, even though they said that they're not going to, so you can't take a Russian for their word. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that the Russian leader and the UN chief discussed proposals for humanitarian assistance and evacuation of civilians from conflict zones, namely in relation to the situation in Mariupol. They also agreed in principle, he said, that the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross should be involved in the evacuation of civilians from the Azovstal steel plant complex, where Ukrainian defenders in the southeastern city are still making a stand. So basically, Putin's like, okay, yeah, you can send in the UN, you can send in some blue helmets and some Red Cross people. It'll just give us shinier targets to shoot. Because that's what Russians do. At least his Russians. I'm not, I shouldn't say that. They're not all bad people, right? Some of those guys, they took the job because what else were they going to do? They were in some rural farm community, landlocked in the middle of Russia, 300 miles away from anything resembling a woman. It's like, go see the world and fight for your country, and we'll give you 3 square meals a day and maybe let you ride around in a tank. That's pretty appealing to a guy who lives in a flyover part of Russia. They're not all bad people. Some of them are just doing a job. The real heinous ones, though, I can't make excuses for them. They don't get a pass. The guys who work at, like, Russia, sell Soviet stuff or whatever, those are just capitalists. They don't care. They're not invested in this. Ivan the Bear Tactical, the guys at Zenitco, they're not involved in this. They're just capitalists and engineers, right? Can't hate them all. Anyway, HVS asks, what about the French artillery France sent to Ukraine? Let's see. Let's see what they sent. 5 days ago, France transferred Caesar howitzers, Milan anti-tank missiles, and a couple 100,000 shells for said artillery. 12 Caesar howitzers. That's kind of cool. Looks like that's the only details I have for you, though. Sorry. I didn't really get a chance to dig into that, but that's a good question. I'm kind of glad you raised it. Moving on before I lose my lunch looking at that picture. Let's see. It is now dusk. We are at 8 p.m. They're only following orders is not a viable defense. You're right. But I'm talking about like the manufacturers and things, not mainly the soldiers. Let's see. So 8 p.m. Ukrainian time. This is a post-facto story because the events took place earlier in the day. Here's your photo. There were several others, but this is basically the gist of it. At least 4 people have been injured Wednesday in the Ukrainian city of Kherson after Russian troops there used tear gas and stun grenades to break up a pro-Ukraine protest, authorities say. The forceful pushback from Russia's army comes a day after they seized full control of the city center and appointed their own mayor, citing local authorities. During a peaceful pro-Ukrainian rally on Freedom Square in the city of Kherson, servicemen of the Russian armed forces used tear gas and stun grenades against the civilian population. This came from the office of Ukraine's prosecutor general. 2 people who claimed to have been at the rally told Reuters that people were waving Ukrainian flags and chanting "Glory to Ukraine." Actually, they were saying "Slava Ukraini," because that's what I say at the end of every episode. Before Russian troops showed up, the soldiers reportedly started opening fire into the air, but there wasn't panic until they threw the tear gas grenade. Mikata is an 18-year-old student who was interviewed describing the events of the day. Let's see. Ihor, which I guess is a different version of Igor, a 33-year-old former factory worker, said that people who were still residing in Kherson are depressed as they understand that they really can't do anything. Many Kherson residents are afraid, he added. All the same, Kherson residents will not give up. They quietly go to rallies. They've hung up flags, blue and yellow ribbons, all in support of Ukraine. It's kind of like prayer, though, isn't it? You think you're doing something, but you're not really helping, are you? It's going to offend some people, I'm sure. Alright, moving on. I believe... this is the last story I've got for you for today. I was wondering why the timeline was screwed up. So, the last story that was the post-facto, that was 1 p.m. my time, which was 8 o'clock over there. This story came 4 hours later. So, 5 o'clock my time, but the story came out of Washington. So, 6:03 Eastern time. And this picture I've got, it's just a reference to the munginess and the disgust of what's going to happen next, because that's pretty much what it's going to look like, that guy right there. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent call for global control of Russia's nuclear weapons poses a reckless and provocative action against Vladimir Putin. This came from a former DIA operative, so here in our side of the pond. Zelensky marked the 36th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster with a speech condemning Russia's completely irresponsible actions, highlighting the dangerous actions taken around the nuclear plants during the invasion. One of the triggers for Putin's invasions, not the ultimate driver, but a trigger, was Zelensky's call for Ukraine to become a nuclear power, Koffler explained. Russia's entire security strategy hinges on nuclear warfare, due to conventional inferiority to U.S. forces. Putin interprets Zelensky's call as a major threat, which he must prevent and possibly preempt. Former Russian minister Andrei Kozyrev previously told Fox News Digital that Putin would only consider nuclear weapons if he felt that there was an existential threat to his country or regime. If Russia or one of those countries really threatened in their hearts, existentially that is, if NATO troops come to Moscow, then they probably would resort to nuclear weapons. Putin reiterated his nuclear threats following Finland and Sweden's indication that both may look to apply for NATO membership in June, when the current member nations meet in Madrid. Zelensky has said that all countries should be concerned about Putin and his nuclear weapons threats. Now, I just read that, and as I was reading it, a thought popped into my head. Every single time somebody does something, Moscow responds with the same response every time. So, Ukraine wants to join NATO. If you join NATO, we're going to attack you. Okay. People are offering aid to Ukraine. If you offer aid to Ukraine, we're going to attack you. Okay. Finland and Sweden want to join NATO. Russia's response: if you join NATO, we're going to attack you. We have nukes. They're a one-trick pony. It's pathetic. The problem is it's one really good trick, isn't it? But the fact of the matter is this. If Sweden and Finland and Norway, if they want, all join NATO, if Poland moves into Ukraine and helps, if Lithuania and Estonia decide that they're going to attack Russia on the eastern flank, or their western flank, I guess, Russia's western flank, if all this starts happening, would Russia really be stupid enough to nuke every country around its border? Because nuclear fallout goes in all directions. He would literally be killing his own people. Then again, he has no regard for human life.
This is lunacy.
Yeah, but one has to argue that you can just keep calling his bluff. Sweden and Finland are not going to stop their push to join NATO now. They know that they're dealing with a guy who's a Cold War relic. He'll be dead soon from old age or a heart attack or a stroke or something anyway. And the next guy's not going to be some post-communist lunatic fuck. It'll probably be that...
It's going to be Medvedev again?
No. I don't think the Russian people are going to put up with that. I think it's going to be that... what was that guy's name, Scott? The one that they got poisoned?
Oh,
Navalny. Thank you.
Navalny.
Yeah.
Navalny.
I have a funny feeling that if Ukraine kicks Russia out of its borders and somehow gets a coalition of people willing to go into Moscow to drag Putin out and put him on trial, you will see the rise of Navalny. And he'll say, look, I've been opposed to this regime this entire time. I have been a political prisoner in my own country. I was almost, assassinated and poisoned and attacked. I will lead this country out of this dark chapter, and I will bring it back to the West, and I hope you can forgive the sins of other idiots before us, kind of a thing. I think he could be the right guy for that. He seems very, very optimistic because he's a capitalist. You know, like when he talks, you don't feel like he's talking bullshit like a typical politician. He put his life on the line, for God's sakes. He's been poisoned. Anyway, just a theory. I think it would be great, like if Ukraine could really take boots to ass to Russia, if Ukraine could single-handedly go into Moscow and take out Putin, like to trial. I'm not saying you have to kill him. Just arrest him. Put him on trial. Like have him tried in Iceland or some shit, you know? And then hang him or push him into a wood chipper.
Nah. Just put him in a firing squad. Be done with it.
No, I don't. No, I need. See, Russians need theater, right? Show-offs. So let him go out with a bang. Like I'll just slow feed his ass into a wood chipper. Anyway.
How about the guillotine? Let's do to France what they did.
Okay, you can use the guillotine only if you lower the blade very slowly, and then you just have people start sitting on it. Otherwise, no deal. Wood chipper, slow feed. That's my jam. I want to be the next John C. Woods. Anyway, let me take a quick look and see if there were any updates since the last story before I did the cutoff. Chances are I won't have anything too substantial to add. Cool. Okay. So, Canadian lawmakers unanimously vote to label Russia's actions in Ukraine as genocide. The motion put up for a vote in the Canadian House of Commons said that Russia's war crimes in Ukraine include mass atrocities, physical harm, systematic instances of willful killing of Ukrainian civilians, rape, and mental harm. All constitute accusations of genocide. Good on you, Canada. And I'm glad that one place stopped calling that dish poutine because too many people thought it meant Putin. But I love poutine. It's so tasty. Anyway, let's see. Any other story? Nope. I think that's it. I think we've got it. I think we've nailed it all for the day. And we went 30 minutes over. Do you guys have anything you want to add? Yet? Cool. Well, in that case, I'm going to play this. And I'm going to thank you all in the audience for watching and for chatting. Sorry I didn't quite address you as often as before. I just didn't know where I could interject in responses. But I'm glad you came. And I'm glad you all watched. I'm glad my panelists were here. I'm glad you took the time. This was The War Room. This was Day 63. And, news permitting, we'll be back tomorrow for Day 64. I've decided I'm not going to change the theme music until the 50th episode. Today was episode 45, technically, because I missed a few days. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlists and see if my other interests might be of interest to you. That's all we've got for you guys. Hit like, maybe subscribe, maybe share it with others who don't know we're doing this yet. Thanks for watching. Slava Ukraini, and we'll see you tomorrow.